Welcome everyone to Grad Conversations. I am Stuart Duncan, Director of Fellowships, Outreach and Programming for the Graduate School. Unfortunately, Karen Brashano is unable to be with us today due to a family emergency, and as such, I'll be moderating this session. Please note that our event today has both live captioning and ASL interpreters. To access these services, please visit s.uconn.edu/caption. That's s.uconn.edu/caption. If you have any accessibility questions, please email ucis@uconn.edu. That's ucis@uconn.edu. As with our last grad conversations, we will be answering questions directly from the chat. And while we may not be able to respond to every single question today, we will certainly be using them to shape resources available and future events. All of the questions today have come directly from the Thought Exchange that was run by the GSS, and also from graduate students who submitted questions prior to the event via our online form. I will be asking these questions in the same voice that they were written by the author. Today, we are joined by Nafis Fouad, President of the Graduate Student Senate and member on the University Senate Executive Committee, Carl Leshway, Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Kent Holsinger, Vice Provost for Graduate Education and Dean of the Graduate School, Radenka Merrick, VP for Research, Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Ray Alexander, Director of International Student and Scholar Services, and Martina Rosenberg, Director of Teaching and Learning Assessment at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. For ease of facilitating conversation, I will be referring to each of our panelists by their first names. Now I'd like to turn it over to Carl for some opening thoughts.
Stuart, thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and support both the graduate school and the great work that GSS and our unions are doing for graduate students. This is a really vulnerable time, and grad students are often our most vulnerable, and at a vulnerable time, it can be even more challenging. We have really been working. I mean, as you know, I'm pretty new to the university, but we are in the midst of something that is very important to be able to think about how we move the university forward through the challenges of COVID, and how do we balance both safety and what we've come to appreciate as the rigor of a UConn educational experience, both for our undergraduates and for graduate students. And as grad students, you're on both sides of this often. You're both a student and you're an instructor. And we have really tried to prioritize safety, structural safety as well, in terms of ensuring that our spaces are most able to allow for social distancing and to allow for us to try to have as much of an in-person experience this semester as possible. I like the way that we have been able to prioritize instructors having some choice in the way that they teach and trying to create that safe space, but also having support from CETL and other parts of the university to again try to ensure that we have the rigor that we've come to think is really important. So thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I'm very privileged to be with the other panelists who I know are working for and with grad students every day.
Thank you, Carl. I'd like to turn it over now to Nafis for some opening thoughts. Nafis?
Hi, thanks, Stuart. I would like to start with the background of this thought exchange and this conversation. After our first grad conversation that we held a while ago, I rolled out this thought exchange to get more interaction from our grad community, and the results came out overwhelming. We had 567 participants, 363 thoughts, and 10,074 ratings of those thoughts. Out of those 363 thoughts, 96 were direct questions. So we organized this event to get them answered. And of course, we had to sort and merge the questions to fit in this 1 hour slot. And there were some questions about the results. What would we do with them? Would the administration see them? So the answer is with this event that I brought those questions and those thoughts to those officers, responsible officers, and they will answer most of the questions today. Moreover, I will share the results of the whole exchange very shortly after this event is done to all the grad students as well as the administrators who are actually taking into account the thought exchange that was rolled out for undergrads as well a while ago. And there were some questions I would like to address during my intro. There was some questions and dissatisfaction with the exchange itself or the platform on the grounds of having the thought exchange anonymously and trusting grad students not to share it with non-grad students. And on that point, I would like to say that I absolutely trust our grad student community, and if I had done the thought exchange again, I would have done the same way. However, I will be, because this thought exchange platform has been used by the university as well as the state commissioner of education. So I trust the platform, and if someone has a better platform, a suggestion for a better platform, I would be glad to use that for further GSS communications or thought exchanges, or any similar platform. And then there was one question that I would shortly like to answer. That question was loaded directly towards GSS that stated, where is GSS? Why isn't GSS pushing back on the administrators making plans without graduate student input? Whose side are they on, ours or the administrators? So this question I wanted to address because I wanted to make it clear that GSS represents all the grad students. And if you see the results, which will very soon from the thought exchange, not everyone thinks that the administration is of grad students. Obviously, I don't, because I work with them closely as a grad representative. And GSS cannot take side among grad students, so this question is kind of misguided. But the other part of this question, where is GSS and why isn't it pushing back? GSS is here bringing all your concerns to you and the administrators. So we work as a bridge to resolve those concerns, not to just push back on some issues. Thanks for your understanding. I will leave the space to Stuart.
Thank you very much, Nafis. And on that note of student representation, we have a question for Carl. Many graduate students feel that they are not adequately represented on committees or invited to the table when important decisions are being made. What are your thoughts on the topic of student representation?
So first I'll begin by saying I know Kent agrees with this, as do everyone on the panel, that we think it is really important. And so I think we've begun, well, in the context of COVID, we have actually done a fair amount to include graduate students. We've started to meet with union representatives. We'll have a second meeting coming up. We've been meeting between the grad school and then through my office, meeting with GSS reps really essentially on a weekly basis. We have grad student representatives on our academic planning meetings and in the SEC meetings, and we are really eager. One of the things we've talked about is once the semester starts, having a kind of a grad student advisory panel to the provost and to the dean of the graduate school. And so we can always do more. And we obviously, you have elected representatives, we want to work with them, but we also want to find ways to ensure that we're giving as much voice. So beyond the advisory board I mentioned, we've actually have one of the union reps on the new vice provost search committee, but we're happy to take other specific strategies. But in the meantime, we really do take it seriously. We benefit a lot from it, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Carl. Our first major section today is on safety and logistics, and the majority of these questions are for you, Carl. First question is, experts say COVID will be much worse in the beginning of the fall. Why settle into an in-person routine just to have to resort back to distance learning? How will it be handled if someone tests positive? How will the people around that person be protected?
So before I answer that, I did want to go back to the last question. I did leave out one thing. We'll be sending out a message, a provost message from our office either tomorrow or Thursday. And in it, we will lay out how anyone can be in contact with the provost's office, mostly with me or with Jeffrey Schulson, who's one of the vice provosts in our office hours. And we really encourage students to take advantage of that. It can be one person, it could be groups. We'll try to accommodate that in any way possible. So I did want to add that. In terms of the semester, it's really hard to know what will happen. And so, we have to try to, as I said, balance safety with trying to have the best educational experience we can. I do believe we have things in place and have given folks choice to be able to not be in person if that is something you're uncomfortable with. And so for the, say, 30% of capacity that we'll have on campus, we believe we have strategies in place that will allow us to get through the semester and be successful. We are now in our planning groups, though, also thinking about what are the things we would need to do if that doesn't work. So we think it's worth trying. We think we will do it right. And if there are signs that we're not, then we think it was a risk worth taking in terms of the stopping and starting again. But one risk we will not allow to happen is to put students or grad students or faculty instructors in positions they don't.
Thank you, Carl. Following up a little bit from that in terms of more specifics, what precautions will be put into place if we're required to go onto campus? Will classrooms be cleaned after every class session? Will common areas be open? I'm concerned about ventilation in older buildings.
Yeah, so we have several groups that are working on these things. And so we are ensuring that we have, best practices and above grade standards in terms of ventilation in rooms, that with the capacity at 30%, which we are mandating across the classrooms, we will be able to ensure that we're keeping the classes as safe as we can. We will have PPE, we will be requiring masks, we're going to be providing support for helping instructors to think about how do you ensure that others are following this without putting yourself into any jeopardy or risk. So there are a lot of different things that we could do. The big thing I will keep coming back to is we are doing everything we can to ensure that for folks who don't feel comfortable being here, that we support that. Now, this will come up in a question later, so I might just try to answer that now. Some have asked, well, what do you do if we're being asked to come in and we're not comfortable? We have really stressed this and allowed this with the faculty, and we are now stressing this with the faculty that they should be providing that same privilege to our graduate students. So it is our expectation this will happen. If this does not, that's where reaching out to your union representation, filing grievances. I understand it can feel risky to do this as a student. So we hope we have everything in place. And every dean's meeting, we talk about this and encourage and make sure that we're providing the same privilege to the grad students that we are to the faculty. But if this does fall down in some places, we will work with you and try to ensure that that gets resolved.
Thank you. A follow-up question to that is that it's a concern that is difficult, even impossible, to prevent all students from participating in group gatherings or to get everyone to wear a mask. How will the guidelines be enforced?
Yeah, so I think the first piece is by having the baseline testing that we are trying to ensure that we have reduced any viral load as much as possible. Then by trying to ensure that each individual can keep space from others. And so while it is true that some may not do that and may contract the virus or just put themselves at risk, each of us have the ability to stay 6 feet away from others, to wear our mask, to, if you're an instructor and you have plexiglass. It will be frustrating, I think, when we hear about or see cases where people are not observing this, but the recommendation there is to always ensure that you are keeping yourself at a safe distance, that you are using sanitizer. And if you do that, you have a very high likelihood of keeping yourself safe.
Thank you, Carl. Just a note to all graduate students who are watching, you can send your questions live to us using the Q&A function through WebEx, and you can send it to all panelists so that everyone can see your question, but we will be filtering questions at each end of the section. Back to our questions from the thought experiment. This is for Carl. What's the point of quarantining residential students if everyone else is coming and going every day? Are people outside the university allowed on campus? Typically, we have speakers and other people coming onto campus conferences. Is that even allowed?
Yeah, so we're going to try to do, I think this is a case where you do the best that you can. There will be some cases where you have folks coming in from outside of campus. Now, these are often our commuter students, our faculty and staff. There will be times where it does make sense to have guests come, but we try to keep that to a minimum. We ensure that they are, again, that they have their masks, that they are socially distancing. All of those things are important. In terms of what we are trying to do to keep everyone safe, though, it is really important that as we think about the residential students, it is a different environment. We can't always be assured that residential students will keep that distance. Part of it is because of bathrooms. To be quite frank, that's one of the biggest driving factors in terms of the density in the dorms. And so our understanding is that for residential students, there essentially is more challenge. That's why, we will be doing surveillance testing and other things. But for those who are coming in from outside the campus, we do want to make sure we have that baseline. We want a Connecticut baseline, not a California or Arizona, Texas baseline. And again, it comes back to this idea of the advantage, the opportunity that commuters, faculty, instructors, staff have, is that they can keep that 6 feet of distance. They don't have those cases where they need to share a residential bathroom. And so we believe that we're able to approach both cases, which are very different in different ways, but meaningful ways.
Thank you, Carl. I'll just wait a couple of seconds to see if we have any questions in the chat on this, any responses here from graduate students. And please feel free again to go to the Q&A section and post those questions there. And we do have staff on the back end actually going through each of those questions and posting them exactly as they are posed to us, and we'll post them exactly as they're written, barring any expletives used, to our illustrious panelists. Okay, if there are no other QAs on that, we're going to move to the next section. Our next section is actually on the graduate student experience, and the first question I'm going to pose to Kent on this one. Kent, if a student gets COVID-19 after the university opens in the fall, how will the university assist the student? How will the rest of us be protected?
Thank you. I'm going to answer this specifically with respect to graduate students because that's what I know. I will preface that with my understanding is that undergraduate students who are diagnosed with COVID-19 and residential will be isolated in dorms in a residential facility dedicated for that purpose. All graduate students will have access to medical care through student health and wellness. And if they, as most graduate students, are living off campus, they will have daily telemedicine appointments with health professionals at Student Health and Wellness to monitor their health and help them access whatever they need to access.
Thank you, Ken. Carl, I was wondering when we will actually know to what extent our classes will be in person or online. What do I do if a class that I need is only offered in person and I don't feel safe being on campus?
Yeah, so actually, I'm new, and I think for others, there was a feeling that registration is taking longer than it normally is, and that was because of COVID. Registration's actually the same schedule that we normally have. It just, because there is a bit more up in the air, I think the timing may seem different than it is in previous years. And so, for many grad students as instructors, part of this depends on what you are, what your TA assignments are. And so because we're giving folks the option to be in person or be online, this requires a lot of time in terms of matching up the student demand and what the supply is from our instructors. We're just now moving into the last part of first year students registering. As of next week, upper class students will be, or second through and above year students will be re-registering. And so at that point, I would say another week after that, you should really start to have a very clear sense of what your teaching assignments would be. In terms of your own classes, that I think we should already be able to have a pretty good sense of. And so if you don't know that now or it's changing, we've asked faculty to not make any additional changes by the end of this week. And so you should have a pretty good sense for your own classes if you don't already by next week.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carl. I'm hearing from some of our technical geniuses in the background that the question and answer is not enabled at this moment. I have gone into the settings and hopefully you're all able to now send Q&As. We apologize for that and we'll keep an eye on that in the background and keep working to fix any errors that are coming up. And we appreciate your patience with this technical issue. Following up with Carl, another question. What if a student is coughing during class? Are they going to be asked to leave? If so, then they lose out on valuable material.
Yeah, so in my research life, I study anxiety and trauma. And part of what we know from that is when you're in stressful situations, it becomes hard to utilize a lot of the skills that you normally are able to utilize in other cases. And I think in this situation, because COVID and everything that's happening is so stressful, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that we have a lot of the skills we need to know how to manage our classrooms. If you feel that you don't, we certainly want you to reach out to CETL, your department, to try to get additional training in those skills. But my sense is most of us have that sense. And I think, like most things, you want to kind of progress in a reasonable way. And so if a student is truly sick and it is creating a distracting environment, it is reasonable to ask that student to go and get medical attention. And so that can be done. Now, what I would say in those cases is we want to make sure that we're getting that student the information that they missed. So that may be something an instructor does. There may be other ways to do that. But what I would say is even in COVID, the good liberal arts and science skills that all of you have are as important to use at any time. And that's really, solid creative thinking and making good decisions. And the most important thing is we want folks to know if you are being thoughtful and trying to make the best decision you can in a tough situation, we will support you. And so while we want to, in a case like this, we want to be clear there, there's ways to go about it. We also want you to be able to manage your classroom in ways that you do in other cases.
Thank you, Carl. A question for Kent. The student is saying, I would like to drop out of my graduate degree because it's just not worth it anymore with all the hindering changes my department is now facing. The school needs to address this with students that are feeling this way. What can we do?
Well, the first thing I would hope you would do is to talk to your advisor, and I hope your advisor would be supportive and help you think through options. I would also encourage you to contact the graduate school and specifically members of the graduate student and postdoctoral affairs team before you do anything as drastic as dropping out of graduate school, because we really want to see you succeed. We want to see you finish the degree that you began rather than completing without the degree. Having said that, we recognize that there may be times when that is the best choice, but we really want to talk with you about that and help you to understand that there are options. For example, there is a leave of absence from graduate studies that is available to all graduate students at any time that allows you to stop your studies, to take time, to deal with life situations that you need to deal with, and to come back without losing any time in your degree program. And so we would certainly urge you to consider taking a leave of absence if necessary, rather than simply leaving your program.
Thanks for that, Kent. I'd also like to report out to folks who are graduate students joining us that the chat system and the Q&A is now enabled. So please feel free to use that feature to send us questions. The next question is for Radenka. Radenka, what does the university plan to do to protect research from shutting down for months in the case that the university closes down due to an outbreak of COVID?
Yep, thank you. I'm unmuted now. So our number one priority is the safety of our students and our faculty. So we keep that in mind and we follow all the protocols, we all of the contact tracing. So in the case we open so far over 620 research labs, the people that still can work from the distance and telecommute, we support them and strongly endorse them to proceed that way. People who are in, we secure the cleaning of the labs at the end of the every day. Every station has to be cleaned and the bathrooms and common area spaces cleaned twice a week. In the case of outbreak, we had only one instance so far happening, and the student reported immediately. He was quarantined for 2 weeks. Nobody else was sick and he came back. In the case of individual people, being infected, we are going to report immediately. We are asking students to self-quarantine, self-identify, and then we are going to decide based on the number of the cases if there is nobody else to run the lab or shut down the lab. But as I said at the beginning, the safety is the number one priority, and then we will see how to manage the research. So far, for a month and a half, we had been doing pretty well, and I'm confident that we will go that way.
Thank you, Radenka. Carl, another question for you. How will adequate access to library resources be provided that is safe for library staff and students? Will libraries be open, including interlibrary loans? Not all resources are online. Having access to other libraries is important for research. How will the university ensure we have access to physical copies of books? Not all books have e-copies, and buying books can become costly.
Yeah, so the library has been very proactive on this measure. And so while there are many things that they're able to get access to electronically, one thing that's great right now is there's something called, I believe it's the Haughty Trust. And this is something that normally is far too expensive for us to utilize. But during COVID, we actually have access to this enormous number of different resources that we can now provide electronically. So there will be a strong collection that can be provided to you electronically. The library also has many strategies in place for contactless pickup. So you can ask, what we will not be able to do is go into the stacks. That would just create too many risk factors. Certain floors will not be available, but there will be. We're trying to get as much access to study space. But in terms of getting books, the contactless delivery and the delivery to you through your email should be able to ensure that everything you need you can get and get in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you, Carl. On the topic of overcrowding, we actually have a question in the Q&A. Carl, I think I'll put this to you, and if you think of anyone else on the panel you'd like to throw this to, please feel free to. Many graduate students commute on the CT transit buses between Hartford and Stores, for instance, which are often very crowded and even on good days during the school year. Is anyone discussing how to handle this with our transportation partners in Connecticut?
Yeah, at the moment, we don't have a great answer for this. We are working to try to increase the number of buses that are available in our campus. And I think because of the reduced density on campus, we should at least be able to limit, and by our campus, I mean on the store's campus, excuse me, limit some of those issues on stores. We know that this is certainly an issue in Hartford, and it's certainly an issue for students going from Hartford to stores and to other campuses. We're working with the Hartford campus right now to identify what some other options may be. There may be some cases where for students who don't need to come in, that's probably the best strategy if you have worries about the density on buses. It's one of those that, like I said, I don't think we have a good answer for, but we are certainly trying to identify other options.
Thank you, Carl. A question for you, Kent. Can students who are supposed to start field placements take a year off rather than losing in-person field opportunities? Field placements are launching pads to our careers. These can't be replaced by remote learnings, trainings, etc. We want to make connections.
Absolutely, and I understand your concerns. There are two parts to this answer. First, as I alluded to earlier, the graduate school does have a mechanism for leave of absence from graduate studies, which allows you to leave graduate school for a year while maintaining your status, and then to return to continue your studies. So that is available to all graduate students, not only those who have field placements. The second part of my answer, though, has to do with the specifics of the field in which you're engaged. There may be particular circumstances in your particular field where delaying the field placement would cause problems that the graduate school isn't directly aware of. So I would discuss the options for delaying with the director of your field program to determine what those options would be.
Thank you, Kent. Please again, feel free to put some questions in the Q&A and we will try and get to them as we can. The next section relates to graduate assistants. And I'm going down here for Kent for this one. What considerations for time off due to catching COVID will be in place for graduate students? Most of us have multiple program requirements to be upheld, not just TA, GA, RA positions, and some departments might not be willing to be flexible.
So here we're speaking specifically about graduate assistant appointments. And so the time off or leave provision for illness is specified in the contract. By right, all graduate assistants have right to 3 days of leave without permission. Up to 21 days of permission is available with departments. And then in addition, there is 10 days of leave of time off available. Between those provisions, it should be possible to accommodate most illnesses, but there's always the possibility of extended leave, and the requests for extended leave can be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Kent. This is a question for Radenka. Again, thinking about graduate assistants here. Will undergraduates be allowed to work in the labs this fall? Will they require any special requirements in terms of accommodations and testing as it relates to graduate assistants working with undergraduates?
All graduates, they will be allowed. They will follow the protocol like all the graduate students and as well as undergraduate. And what I mean by that, first they will do the safety training for the labs under the COVID. They have to pass that one. They have to do the safety training. And as long as they are following the rules and working with the faculty, they will be allowed. During the summer, we approved the graduate students go to lab. By the fall, we will allow undergraduate, and we will still follow the rules of keeping the distance and wearing the masks. So the same rules that apply to graduates will apply to undergraduates. And then the supervisor has to schedule the shifts in the lab and how many people can be in the lab, regardless of the graduate or undergraduate or graduates, and it will be based on the footprint of the lab.
Thank you, Radenka. Question for Carl, though feel free to pass this on. There are some concerns from TAs having to deal with undergrads who are having difficulties academically and emotionally. Will UConn Behavioral Health and CSD be inundated and unable to cope with student requests in a timely manner as they were in the spring?
So my own research area is mental health and clinical treatment. This is something I care really deeply about, and it is something that I want to be a major part of what our administration takes on. This will be something that we will have to put more resources to. We will have to be creative and clever in the ways in which we are making mental health services more accessible. I know one issue for many grad students is that if you're in a waiting room where there are undergraduates, you might be uncomfortable because they could be students in your class. There's a lot of little things that happen that make it challenging for grad students to access services even in the best of times. We are adding additional clinical providers, and this is something being done through student affairs. We are working on ensuring the inclusivity of those providers, that we're creating an environment where everyone feels as comfortable and safe getting therapy support. I don't know if this will be enough. If it appears that it isn't, we will then try to find other ways to expand on that. But we certainly want more resources, and we want to certainly make sure that we find ways for those who are not on campus, that they are able through telemedicine to be able to continue to get those services. So I would say this is something that we have to come back in every few months, and I think you will see that we are putting more resources towards it, but at this point it's partially seeing how much need is and where that need is, and so we can really target things.
Thank you, Carl. Our next section is related to being a teaching assistant. So these are questions for Martina. Martina, I have never taught online. What resources are available to help me, and how do you TA from a distance?
Very good question. Thank you for that. So how do you TA from a distance? Part of it will not be substantially different than in person. So it depends. TAs, GAs are often in roles that span the spectrum from help for grading up to being instructor of record for entire sections. And it clearly depends on the discipline and on the format of the class, what exactly this GA-ship will look like. So I can't comment on the specifics. For that, I would encourage people to reach out to their GA coordinator, their course director and department to find these things out. I would say that there is, from CETL's side, a range of things that are there to support TAs. So all the services that are available to faculty are also available to TAs and GAs, and this includes one-on-one consultations, the workshops, the teaching talks, our currently iterations of the class that we have for faculty to prepare for online teaching, which is called Preparing for Distance Education. So if you're a TA, especially if you are in a role that a larger role in your course, you're absolutely welcome to enroll and learn about possibilities. So we're all in this together. None of us has chosen to be in this situation. Let me also say that a distance learning class that is planned takes months to put together, like a real online class. And so we are trying to help faculty in this somewhat accelerated schedule. And we're also trying to help TAs and GAs that are in the same role. So that being said, I can say something in general about what is maybe expected or what may a graduate assistantship look like. There will, of course, also always be the grading work that has been a traditional big part of TA-ship. But here is where you can help your faculty. So some of the faculty that come to us are not super comfortable with online teaching, with remote teaching, and they may not be as tech savvy as you are. So you are a really, really important link, the link between your students and that faculty, to troubleshoot technology, to help facilitating in a course, be it face-to-face, online, synchronous, so at the same time, or asynchronous, where portions are done by students at different times on demand, essentially. So the facilitation techniques and facilitation prowess becomes really, really important to create the sense of community that, and give students a good experience and a significant learning experience when they're taking their courses. So another way that TAs are absolutely valuable is help faculty to up the amount of office hours or personal contact time between students. So if you're teaching a large class as a faculty and you have GAs or TAs, they may feel simply overwhelmed, and having some of the Q&A taken off of this faculty that is already overwhelmed, and putting it in a language that may be closer to the generation that you are teaching is very valuable. And we can certainly, if you have questions about that, please contact CETL and please come to our office or talk to any of the faculty developers or the good folks, of all of my fantastic colleagues in educational technology and in eCampus. There's good folks that have good suggestions. So again, specifics, I would push you to ask as early as possible what your department exactly is planning and what is exactly happening in the course.
Thank you, Martina. And a follow-up question for you. Some of the professors are difficult to understand, so we rely on visual as well as the audio cues to try to better understand what they are saying. What if we can't hear the professor because of the mask?
So everybody, in my experience, relies on nonverbal cues. So it's not just the professor, it's also, or not only the student, it's also the professor or instructor. So as in ESL and English as a second language person, I appreciate the additional cues that are given when I can see people. And we all are relearning right now how other cues we can draw from to essentially read the room when you can't really read the room, when most of the cameras are off. How do you engage students? This is all rolled in creating a community online when you didn't have the chance to see anybody face-to-face beforehand. So, so that's the online portion. If instructors are face-to-face and they can choose to wear masks, however, CETL is in an advising role to many of the committees that are working with the reopening plans, and some thoughts are given towards creating a little toolkit for instructors, which may also include a face shield. So currently 2 different models are under consideration. So face shield, one of these plexiglass things that are in front of you so you can see the entire face. You still have approximately the same protection in both ways with respect to the virus, but you can see the facial expression and the there's no muffling. And with these face shields comes also the possibility to clip a mic behind that face shield, so there's nothing that gets lost in terms of sound quality. So I don't think the final decision has been made, as many of the panelists have alluded to. There's many things that are in flux, but this is currently something that is looked at, because there's also not only there's also accessibility questions, right? So some people may rely on lip reading or more than just the facial expression per se, but it definitely benefits everybody. It's not just an accessibility issue.
I appreciate that, Martina. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our next section now on international students. I'm turning this question to Ray. As an international student, will I be able to return with the borders closed? How are students expected to return to campus when traveling from a different country?
Thanks, Stuart. So we know that returning to campus this fall will generally be quite challenging for many international students who have already departed the US. We are sort of tracking the number of students we think have left, and about 95% of international graduate students have remained, which I think speaks to sort of the difficulty of the decision in deciding whether to travel home or not. We know that this is a really difficult time and a difficult decision to make. And I would encourage you to make an appointment with your ISSS advisor if you are considering traveling, or if you've already traveled and you are trying to determine whether you'll be able to return to the US or if it's best to stay where you are. We do know that visa services worldwide are starting to reopen, but only in certain places. We know that COVID-19 related entry restrictions are starting to be lifted, but again, only for students traveling from certain countries. We know that flight availability really varies from country to country, and the ability to travel to and from the US and where you may be located is quite limited. So I think overall the situation for students who are trying to return is that really the situation is quite uncertain. And for some, returning for fall may not be an option, or it may not be the best option. But we are trying to stay on top of this information, which is ever changing, and get it out to students as soon as we can. And we are also monitoring student plans for fall. And if there are international graduate students who have not yet submitted your fall 2020 check-in form to ISSS, we would ask that you do that as soon as your plans for fall are confirmed, and to just contact us if you have any questions about that.
Thank you, Ray. Continuing in the same vein with international GAs, I'd like to ask this question to Kent. Has the university done anything to help international GAs who can't physically be in the US? The university announced they can't work remotely. Can they be helped?
Yes, they can. There are actually a couple of things that are available to international GAs who can't be here this fall. The first is any international GA who would have held an appointment in fall 2020. We have an arrangement to be able to allow them to take classes remotely without paying tuition. To take advantage of that, you'll need to work through your department, make sure they are aware of your interest in taking advantage of this, and they will let us know, and we'll take it from there. In limited circumstances, the university has determined that it will be possible for some GAs to hold appointments while outside the US. And again, we'll need to have you work through your department, make sure your department is aware that you are willing and able to work remotely. And if it is in fact possible for you to perform your duties remotely, subject to a variety of conditions, we will allow those appointments in certain circumstances. But let your departments know soon so that they can let us know, and we'll be in contact.
Thanks, Ken. We're going to move on to our next section now, which relates to finances. Carl, this question is for you. Why isn't the administration taking a bigger pay cut? I've lost a lot of income because of COVID, and I only make $20,000 a year. Administrators need to cut their pay and donate it to the Student Fund First, or Student First Fund, apologies.
Yeah, finances are incredibly hard right now. And I will say at this point, only the administration has taken what is ostensibly a 10% pay cut. Our strategy is that we want to try to send a message that it is important that we need to be taking a lead in trying to help the university get back on its feet. But without question, there is as much as $75 to $100 million in losses from the university. And so it is really challenging to figure out how do we address all of those aspects where those challenges are. So I think it's always a reasonable question, why not more? I will say nationally, we have taken as large a pay cut as I've seen in almost any place. And I will say we have done this in a way, and while it is only a small thing. We have never put any pay cuts for graduate students or any pullback of raises or other things even on the table for conversation. And so this is not a big thing, but we are trying to do things where we can, and also realizing that all of those places where the university is losing money, we're trying to figure out how to support moving forward without having to cut faculty positions, without having to pull back on important staff positions, without having to pull back on the other things that we really care about. And the one thing I will say that has been a positive is, as far as I can tell, we have not had to pull back on faculty positions. We hired faculty positions this past year in a way that still allows departments and programs to function and students to get the support they need and programs to continue. If things continue to be challenging, there's hard decisions ahead, and I believe our administration will take the lead in what has to be done.
Thanks, Carl.
I'd like to add something, Stuart, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
On that point is the question was that the Student First Fund needs to get the money from the administrators. So what I wanted to add is I just heard back from the Office of the Dean of Students, and the Student First Fund is actually now up and running. The balance that they have is very close to the open applications that they have to meet. So I think if like they have been processing, I know it has been taking a bit longer for them to process during COVID, but as in our last conversation, I said that we said that they had a lot of applications, like very over applications and total amount of requests. So, but now it seems that it has rolled back to a rolling fund, and if you are in need, if you think you can, you fall in the criteria, do feel free to apply, and I think you'll get help. They are back into track again. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Nafis. For those of you who are submitting questions, please make sure you put your question to all panelists, as we have some tech folk in the background that are then feeding those questions onwards, just due to technology concerns and multiple screens. So if you've sent me the message just to the host, I won't be able to see that. Please resend those questions to our to all panelists, please. But going to a question on finances, Ken, I think I'll pose this question to you. Some grad students have had to delay their thesis defenses a few months due to delays caused by COVID-19. This comes with a $500 registration fee and an accompanying $300 late fee if that registration fee cannot be paid on time. A poor job market makes it difficult for many of these students to find a post-graduation job. This is a serious debt to take on. Is the graduate school considering these cases and considering waiving the registration fee or late fee?
Stuart, this is a great example of why we take live questions, because this is actually a very real circumstance that had not occurred to me, honestly, until this person brought forward the question. It's certainly something I will take a close look at and work with my colleagues to determine whether we can do it. I understand the need, and I believe we may be able to do something, but I can't promise right now that we will be able to do something. I will say that Carl and I have been discussing various things about graduate students whose graduation may have been delayed as a result of COVID-19. And I don't know, Carl, do you want to say anything more about that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're still trying to piece the different parts together, but we believe there may be some things we could do both in terms of waivers and then also some additional funding in those cases where students can show that they would have graduated either in a master's or a PhD, but specifically COVID, either because of its impact on classes or its impact on your research, essentially kept you from graduating. This is something that I give the credit to the GSS for bringing forward to us, and we've been working through. And I would have hoped we'd be able to have an answer to this, but it's just something that's been more recent. And I do think we're certainly have identified some pockets of money we may be able to do something with this.
Thank you, Carl and Kent. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to several questions from the chat and Q&A and a couple of non-related questions. So this is for either Carl or Kent. UConn does not keep any records of why grad students switch advisors, switch programs, or leave the university. This leaves the graduate school under-equipped to 1, identify professors who benefit from mentorship training, 2, diagnose which departments struggle most in supporting students from underrepresented minority groups, and 3, noticing outlying trends amongst individual advisors that may merit further investigation, for example, potential for unreported sexual harassment. Is UConn willing to start keeping records of why graduate students switch advisors, switch programs, and leave the university?
So I'll start on that. Stuart, as you know, this is an issue that we have discussed within the graduate school for several years. We are very interested in finding a way to understand and help faculty become better advisors of graduate students. And that includes, unfortunately, in a small number of instances, identifying individuals who are not doing well. We don't currently have a good mechanism for doing so. We are trying to find a good way to monitor these sorts of things, and we would welcome suggestions on how to do so.
The other thing I just very quickly add, the faculty and staff development vice provost position that we're in the finals now, you may have seen those candidates are interviewing. This is a great example of where working closely with faculty, particularly in development, in mentoring, we can identify where some of those challenges are. And in some cases, it's handling things when they've gone wrong, but a lot of it is better training. And while the grad school does a lot of that, I think it's the provost's office responsibility to be a good partner with a position like this as well.
Thank you, Carl. A couple of questions from the chat here, referring back to our safety and logistics section. And so I'll pose this to Carl. Do graduate students who are living off campus need to return to their Connecticut residences 2 weeks prior to the start of classes on August the 31st? Does it depend on where they're coming from, i.e. New England versus West Coast?
Yeah, this is a case where the state guidance is really important. And in some cases that changes. Certainly if you are coming from hotspot states, it is really important for the state guidelines at minimum that you were back in that 2-week period. It's probably a safe thing to the extent that you can be here 2 weeks before to settle in. It is a good idea, but if you're not, at least right now, my understanding of the state guidance is if you're not coming from a state where it is a hotspot, you would not need to have that quarantine time, but that can always change. And the states that are on that list can always change.
Thank you. Another question regarding, back to our library resources question from earlier. They say, regarding the library resources, can we access the PCs, the computers, remotely? The library has some computers with some software installed whose licenses are not available through UConn. Is there any way to access these remotely during this COVID-19 situation?
So I don't know the answer to that right now. I will say that we talked to the head of ITS today in the library about what are ways that we can find some financial resources for students who don't have the either hardware, software access that they need. We will be coming forward in a week or so to be able to share what those strategies are. But in the short term, if you don't have what you need, you can reach out to someone in the library staff or someone in ITS to ask what are ways in which you'll be able to get this remotely. In some cases, it won't cost anything extra. In cases where it will, I think we will have resources in place to cover that, at least in many cases.
Thank you, Carl. We are approaching, it's actually 5 o'clock now, Eastern Standard Time, and so I want to honor all of our panelists and grad students with keeping this to the allotted time. We have received all of your questions, and we will, as a group, look at those and address those in a number of ways after this event. I'd like to thank Nafis, Carl, Kent, Radenka, Ray, and Martina for joining us today. But I'd especially like to thank all the graduate students for their time, their thoughtful and probing questions, and for their continued excellence in making UConn a vibrant intellectual, social, and culturally engaging community, even in the face of COVID-19. We will continue to do our best to support graduate students in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. Please reach out to any of our panelists, including the staff at the graduate school, with any questions and concerns you have. Have a safe, productive, and engaging semester, and thank you again for joining us today.